From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel, a Potomac Watch podcast.
Welcome to All Things with Kim Strassel. This week, our guest, Senator Ted Cruz, who is running for re-election in Texas against Democratic Representative Colin Allred. So, Senator Cruz, where are you calling to us from today?
Well, I am in the middle of a 53-stop bus tour. We just left Victoria, Texas. We're driving now to Corpus Christi, Texas. Then we're headed down to the Rio Grande Valley. We've got rallies throughout the valley, then back up around Houston, around Dallas, East Texas. The last few days, we've been in the Panhandle. We've been in West Texas. We are crisscrossing the state, doing massive standing room rallies all over the state.
Wow, that's quite the feat. Democrats are gunning for Texas, obviously, your seat in particular. Polls have been all over the place. The Senate Leadership Fund had a poll a couple weeks ago saying you were only up by 1 point against Colin Allred, your challenger. But two Texas state polls, more recently, University of Texas had you up by 7, University of Houston up by 5. What's the real state of your race? What are you seeing out there?
Well, you're right. The polls are all over the place. The real state of the race is it's a serious fight. Chuck Schumer has been explicit that I am his number one target in the country. And Schumer and George Soros are spending between $100 million and $150 million trying to beat me. They are flooding the state with cash. My opponent, Colin Allred, who is a very left-wing Democrat, his first 4 years in the House, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. He's been on TV for 4 months, saturating the airwaves. I just got up on TV a few weeks ago. We've been massively outspent to date. And the reason Schumer is making such a big investment in the race is two things. Number one, if you're a hardcore partisan Democrat, after Donald Trump, there is nobody in the country you want to beat more than me. And so every left-wing radical in New York, in Chicago, and San Francisco, they go online and they give to my opponent, and it just rains money. But number two is a simple question of math. If you look at the current Senate seats right now, the Democrats have a 51-49 majority. It is 100% that will win West Virginia. The Democrats aren't even really contesting it, so that takes us to 50-50. And based on the current polling, Republicans are likely to win Montana, which would take us to a 51-49 Republican majority. Schumer is looking at the identical polls. And so if he wants to remain majority leader, he has one path and only one path to do that, and that's to come to Texas and try to beat me. And the last time I ran in 2018, it was the most expensive Senate race in U.S. history. I was outspent 3-1. And we barely won. We won by less than 3 points, 2.6 percentage points. And so Schumer's calculus is all he needs to do is gain 3 points in Texas, and he flips Texas. He gets rid of me, and he potentially remains majority leader as a direct result of that.
Yeah, you are right. You are his best shot of remaining majority leader, and the stakes there are very high. I want to talk about your Texas race, some of the issues in particular. And one reason I love to talk to candidates is because, average people, they read stories, they listen to podcasts like this, and they get the top line. They hear Republicans are beating on Democrats on this, Democrats are hammering Republicans on that. They kind of want to know what the candidates are actually finding there on the ground. And so I wanted to ask you, obviously, the big play Democrats are making this year, it's what they wish this entire race is about abortion.
Yeah.
Texas has a 6-week law. There's a lot of fights going on at the state level. We can agree this is a states' rights issue.
Yeah.
And Texas is a lot different from California, but, it's not all that different from some other Republican states that have less restrictive laws. So what's it like running in Texas on this issue? Is the law a liability for you? How do you feel this issue is going for you as you campaign in the state?
Well, on television, it is about the only thing that they run attack ads on. And Allred and Schumer have run more than $40 million of attack ads focused exclusively on abortion. They're obsessed with abortion. I can tell you as I travel around and campaign, and we've done now campaign rallies all over the state, I don't hear it raised by very many voters. It is only reporters who raise the issue. It is reporters and Democrats paying for attack ads. What I hear from Texans, I hear, number one, the economy and inflation. And I hear, number two, illegal immigration, the invasion at our southern border, and the crime that is a direct result of that. Those are overwhelmingly the issues I hear from Texans. But The Democrats can't defend their records on either one of them. Colin Allred's record is a disaster on both of those issues. So the reason why he wants to talk abortion all day long is he's trying to change the subject from his own record. You know, what I'm doing, Kim, on the bus tour and what I did last week in the debate, I think every campaign should compare the candidates' records and what they've done in office and what their vision is for the state. I've spent 12 years in the Senate fighting every day for 30 million Texans, fighting for jobs, fighting for freedom, and fighting for security, and delivering real results. In 12 years, I have authored and passed into law 101 different pieces of legislation, major victories, bringing thousands and thousands of jobs to the state of Texas. So I'm talking about that all across the state. Allred, in his entire time in Congress, he has only authored and passed 3 different bills into law. But what he has done is he has been an absolute rubber stamp for the extreme left wing of the Democrat Party. As I said, his first 4 years in Congress, he voted 100% with Nancy Pelosi. The first 2 years Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in office, Colin Allred voted 100% with them. And so the contrast is night and day. I've worked hand in hand with Donald Trump to cut taxes. Colin Allred wants to raise taxes. I've been the leading defender of oil and gas and energy and Texas jobs. In the Senate, Colin Allred has voted repeatedly with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to attack energy and Texas jobs. Colin Allred voted in favor of Joe Biden's ban on new export permits for liquid natural gas. That killed thousands of jobs in Texas. And on the border, I've been the leading defender of securing the border for 12 years. I worked hand in hand with President Trump to do so, and we achieved incredible success. We produced the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Colin Allred has consistently voted with Kamala Harris for open borders over and over and over again. And so that's the contrast I'm finding that Texas voters care about.
Well, yeah, on that border point, obviously Republicans in recent years have teed up any number of bills that were directed at securing the border. And yet Colin Allred, as far as I can tell, he only wants to talk, much like Kamala Harris, about this one bill that was teed up earlier this year that Republicans did not pass. And their argument is, oh, well, if this bill, it had fixed everything and Republicans blocked it. I mean, is that flying with Texas voters?
No, the bill they're focusing on was a terrible bill. It was a Chuck Schumer bill. It was designed not only not to fix the border crisis, but it was designed to make it worse. So the Chuck Schumer bill that Colin Allred and Kamala Harris support, it would have codified, it would have written into law catch and release. Catch and release is the lawless policy right now that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are doing that caused this crisis. It would have codified that when illegal immigrants are apprehended, they're simply let go. It would have given them automatic work permits. It would have paid for taxpayer-funded lawyers for many illegal immigrants. It would have given billions of dollars to sanctuary cities and to NGOs that are actively assisting with the human traffickers. It went out of its way to screw the state of Texas by preventing Texas from suing on immigration matters in Texas federal courts, instead forcing them to go to very liberal federal courts in D.C., and it would have normalized 5,000 illegal immigrants a day. That works out to 1.8 million illegal immigrants a year, every year forever. It was designed to continue this invasion in perpetuity. There is a reason why, when the bill text was released, that it collapsed within 24 hours, because every Republican looked at it and said, this is a disaster, and it makes the problem worse. The entire purpose of the bill was political camouflage, so Kamala Harris and Colin Allred and other Democrats could pretend they want to do something about the border while simultaneously doing nothing. You know, and by the way, the honking you're hearing, our bus is going down the freeway, and that's an 18-wheeler leaning on the horn, hopefully, I think, in support, because our bus has the campaign logo on the side of it.
Well, if he didn't drive you off the road, I think you should take it as support.
I agree.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, more with Texas Senator Ted Cruz and his reelection race.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel, a Potomac Watch podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Kim Strassel here on All Things, this week with Ted Cruz. One more issue, and then I want to turn to some broader things. But I saw the other day the Dallas Morning News endorsed your opponent. Probably not a surprise, big city newspaper there.
Oh, yeah.
But I found it curious. It celebrated his supposed bipartisanship and cited, for instance, his support for the CHIPS Subsidy Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and your opposition to both of those spending bills. And I only find this amusing because we have an election in which the number one voter concern is inflation, which, of course, has been driven largely by federal government spending like those bills. So I guess in the Dallas Morning News's minds, it's okay to spiral inflation and add trillions to the debt so long as you do it in a bipartisan fashion. But you voted against both of those. That certainly helps you in your message to voters about inflation. But how big of a problem is it for Republicans? They don't always have the best spending record. And do you feel like when you go out there and you talk to this, some voters are like both parties are as bad as each other?
Well, there's certainly that sentiment. I will say the Dallas Morning News, sadly, like all the big papers in Texas, is a hard left paper. The Dallas Morning News has endorsed against me in every race I've ever run, including in every primary I've ever run. Last time they endorsed a primary opponent who got 2% in the polls. So I can't say voters were terribly concerned about their view. I understand they don't like conservatives. That's their view, and that's the view of all the editorial boards in Texas. I will say I wish we had a Wall Street Journal in Texas. Sadly, we do not, and Manhattan gets the Journal. By the way, Kim, if you could suggest moving the Journal to Texas, we would welcome you with open arms. We're opening a Texas Wall Street in Dallas. It would sure be nice to have the Journal come join us.
It will be my top issue in our next editorial board meeting.
We will throw the biggest barbecue and Tex-Mex party with free margaritas you've ever seen.
All right, we're going to hold you to that.
But look, on the substance, yes, people are fed up with both parties. They're fed up with the spending. They're fed up with the out-of-control debt that is bankrupting our party. And you and I have sat down and talked about it before. It is a bipartisan problem. On any multi-trillion-dollar spending bill, you get all of the Democrats and you get about half the Republicans. And there are about 20 of us who are fiscal conservatives who want to stop this insane spending binge. And right now, we simply don't have the votes. And I think people are frustrated with that. I will say it is amusing that the Dallas Morning News echoed Colin Allred's talking points about being bipartisan, and every paper in Texas repeats those talking points. He bases it on this nonprofit group that ranks members of Congress for bipartisanship. And I was very puzzled when I heard that this group had ranked him as the most bipartisan in Texas, because, as I said, the guy's voting record is 100% with Nancy Pelosi. So how the hell are you bipartisan if you're voting 100% with Nancy Pelosi? And so I went and looked at this group and who they were, and their board consists of a bunch of Democratic donors who give to Democrats to get elected. And they say right on their website that in making their rankings, they don't actually look at how you vote. It doesn't matter how you vote. They don't care how you vote. All they look to is the words you say. If you sound bipartisan, if you stand up and say, let's be bipartisan, and then you vote like a hard left radical, they'll say, as they did with Colin Allred, you're the most bipartisan member of the delegation. It really is a joke. And what he points to, and those two bills are a good example, are bills that every single Democrat votes for, including Nancy Pelosi, and a handful of Republicans. And he says, see, I voted with Pelosi and all the Democrats with a few Republicans. Look how bipartisan I am. It really is laughable. And I'll mention on something like you mentioned CHIPS and Sciences. So that's actually worth drilling down a little bit more on. So the CHIPS and Sciences bill was actually several bills combined together. One of it was the FABS bill, which I was a co-sponsor of and a strong supporter of. And it improved the tax treatment for building new semiconductor manufacturing plants in America. I strongly support that. I very much think we need much more semiconductor manufacturing capability in the U.S. The final bill included also $60 billion in direct taxpayer payments to giant companies. And I think corporate welfare is a bad idea. I think history has shown that when we give billions of dollars of taxpayer money to giant corporations, bad thing has happened. It invites corruption. So I voted against the final bill because I didn't like the direct payments to the giant corporations. But, and here's the interesting thing, Kim, we're not right now seeing multiple new semiconductor fabs being built in Texas, and they're running into massive delays with environmental permitting. The delays are delaying the plants 3, 4, 5 years. So I teamed up with Mark Kelly, Democrat from Arizona, on legislation to streamline the environmental permitting for new semiconductor manufacturing. In our legislation, Kelly Cruz, we passed it out of the Senate unanimously. And then just about a month ago in the House, I went to the House floor to whip the votes. We needed to get 2/3 of the votes on the House to have it carry. We got 2/3. We got, I think, 77 Democrats voted for my bill. It passed into law, and very quietly, Joe Biden signed it into law. He didn't hold a signing ceremony. Didn't want anyone to know he was signing my bill. But that bill will be regulatory reform, lessening the regulatory burden on building new semiconductor plants. I actually think that's how a principled free market conservative helps bring jobs and also helps on the national security imperative of new semiconductor manufacturing.
Agreed. And we need a lot more of that permitting reform across all kinds of industries.
Amen.
If I remember correctly, I believe those direct handouts also ended up coming with a bunch of strings attached in terms of workforces. And that's also delayed a lot of that as well, too. So early voting started this week in Texas. And apparently you are getting record-breaking early turnout. I'm not a huge fan myself of early voting. I'd like to return us to a time when we all showed up to the polls on the big day. But are you out there encouraging your voters to vote early? And what do you think those huge numbers mean? Do you think it means a bigger turnout? Do you think more Republicans are voting early this time? More Democrats? What do you think that signifies?
So I am encouraging people to vote early. And I'll tell you, in Texas, the way it works, we've done this for a while this way, and it works well, which is we have 2 weeks of early voting, but it's in-person early voting. So you go to the polls and you vote in person. We have a little bit of mail-in voting, but that's for seniors and people with serious disabilities. So it's not widely used. The vast bulk of the early voting is just like Election Day, but it's the 2 weeks beforehand. So yesterday was the first day of our early voting. I went and voted yesterday, and it's easier because the lines are shorter. It took 15 minutes for me to vote. We did see a huge turnout yesterday, the highest that's ever been recorded. I think we're going to see the highest turnout we've ever had. We've got 2 weeks of early voting. I think it is likely that 60 to 70% of the total vote in Texas will be cast early. And then you'll get 30 to 40% of the vote cast on Election Day. Now, the good news is, unlike some other states, some blue states who can't seem to figure out how to run an election, we'll know the results in Texas by election night. It may be 10, 11 o'clock at night if it's close, but we'll know that night. We'll count the ballots and be done with it. I think that's the way it should be done. But I think it's huge turnout, and we're focused really on two things. One, turning out our voters. But number two, working on persuasion, really targeting swing voters. Many of them are suburban women. They are women who historically have voted Republican, but who are not terribly huge fans of Donald Trump's rhetoric. And so we have been trying to convey messaging to them of, look, the issues you care about, you don't like inflation, you don't like what's happening with the economy, you don't like this invasion of illegal immigrants, and do you really want a Venezuelan gang member moving in next door to you and threatening your kids? Just how much do you dislike mean tweets? And that, I hope we can bring some of those voters back. I think we can. I'm seeing promising signs that will turn out the blue-collar voters that more and more have become the base of the Republican Party, but also see some of those suburban voters who had drifted from the party come back. And if we do that, we're going to have a very good election night.
So on the early voting, by the way, this is why it's great to have civil debate. I think you might have convinced me that 2 weeks of early voting in person is something I could live with. So there you go. Maybe I'll be a fan of the Texas model.
All right. Awesome.
We're going to take one more break. When we come back, more about the Texas Senate race.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is All Things with Kim Strassel, a Potomac Watch podcast.
Welcome back. I'm here with Ted Cruz. You just mentioned a demographic, women, obviously hugely important, suburban voters. And you're right. If the Republicans could bring those voters back, they would have a very big night all around. I've always been fascinated by Texas because in my mind, it was sort of an early indicator of how demographics started changing in this country and how quickly.
Yep.
The enormous flip the parties have had where Democrats have become much more the party of elite, educated, wealthy voters, Republicans much more the party of the working working class. And we watched that, those Texas border districts, counties that had gone for Hillary Clinton by significant margins and almost overnight flipped to becoming Republican. How is that playing in your race? Are you still seeing that kind of change?
We are. It's a very significant factor. What you just mentioned, I think the most important political shift of the last decade is that Republicans have become a blue-collar party. We are the party of truck drivers and steel workers and cops and firefighters and waiters and waitresses and everyone with calluses on their hands. And I think that's a great thing. When I got to the Senate 12 years ago, I was fighting very hard for that to have happen. And at the time, that was a lonely voice. Most of my Republican colleagues did not share that vision. I think Donald Trump accelerated that process dramatically. And I think we should be the party of jobs. I also think we are seeing in particular, and in Texas in particular, Hispanic voters are moving right. South Texas, look, the Rio Grande Valley is seeing the absolute disaster of open borders. They're seeing the dead bodies. Last year, 853 migrants died crossing illegally into this country. That's almost 3 a day that Texas farmers and ranchers are finding abandoned on their properties.
Wow.
They are seeing women who've been sexually assaulted. They're seeing children who've been brutalized. They're seeing people dying of fentanyl and drug overdoses. If you see firsthand what's happening at the border, you can't defend it. I mean, it is heartbreaking and it is a tragedy. And I think you're seeing the Hispanic community. Look, I am the son of a Cuban immigrant. My father came to Texas in 1957 with nothing. He couldn't speak English. He had $100 in his underwear. And his first job was washing dishes, making 50 cents an hour. And he worked his way through school. He went to the University of Texas. He became a small business owner in the oil and gas business. And today my dad is a pastor. I think the Hispanic community fundamentally is a conservative community. Our community, the values that resonate are faith, family, patriotism, hard work. And I think particularly in South Texas, we're seeing it becoming redder. Just 2 days ago, Senator Eddie Lucio, a longtime Democrat state senator, endorsed my campaign. And he came out publicly and said, I'm voting for Ted. I've worked with Ted for years. We have a great relationship. We've worked together on jobs and small businesses. We've worked together to secure the border. His endorsement's a big deal. Pete Saenz, the former mayor of Laredo, another Democrat, has publicly endorsed me for the same reason. We've worked together for years on small business and jobs and border security. Sheriff Danny Dominguez, the sheriff of Presidio County, he has over 100 miles of the Rio Grande River on his county. He's been an elected Democrat for 28 years. He's endorsed my campaign because he wants a senator who will stand with law enforcement. And I'll tell you, Kim Ogg, who is the district attorney in Harris County. Harris County is Houston. It's the biggest county in Texas. She is an elected Democrat, elected to 2 different terms. She has publicly endorsed me because she wants a senator who will stand with law enforcement and lock up criminals and fight to secure the border. So I think we're seeing real movement by focusing on issues and substance and common sense that makes sense to ordinary Texans.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think this shift is the most consequential thing we've seen in politics for the last decade, and we will see over the next coming decades. Okay, last one quick. I know you got to go, but if you were a betting man, and I'm assuming you are a bit if you are in politics, chances of a Republican majority in the Senate come January?
80%.
All right, good. Wow, that's solid and bold.
But let me give a caveat. 80% if we win Texas. And literally yesterday, Schumer dumped millions more into Texas. They see gaining 3 points in Texas and beating me as the only way of stopping a Republican majority. So I just want to encourage your listeners, if you don't want to see that happen, come to our website. It's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. We've got over $100 million on the other side. We've got more than a dozen polls showing it as a 1 or 2 or 3 point race. And so I need your help. So please come to tedcruz.org and contribute and support the campaign so we can be sure to communicate with the voters in Texas, let them know my record and my opponent's record. If we do that, we'll win.
Senator, thank you for your time, and make sure you keep us updated on how things are going out there.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Kim.
Thank you, Senator Cruz, and thank you to our listeners. We are here every week on All Things with Kim Strassel. If you like the show, please hit subscribe, and if you'd like to write to us, you can do so at pwpodcast@wsj.com.